Hello, my name is Daniel Mart. I am an actor and filmmaker based out of South Florida. And this week, we're going to be doing my top 50. You heard that right. It's October. So I'm like, you know what? Let's go big. We'll go home. So I'm like, top 50 horror movies. Now, before we begin, actually, I do want to say some stuff beforehand. Now, normally you would be seeing my face, but I am currently very, very sick. I've had a cold for the past 3 or 4 days. Usually, I only have like a day cold. Doesn't usually last more than a day, maybe two. But for the past 3 or 4 days, I've been like really sick. So I kind of look like shit, and I kind of don't want to be on camera. So we're going to do a voice recording. Also, before I actually get to the list, I do want to set some ground rules. And that's basically that first off, these are all basically my favorite movies. Okay, it's not like a top 10 horror movies of all time, something like that. These are my top 50 favorite movies of all time. This is for me. Also, you may notice that there are some maybe notable omissions on the list. And that's either because A, I haven't seen the movie in question, or B, I just don't consider it a horror movie, or C, maybe I just don't like the movie that much to put it on my list. So I just also want to point that out very fast. And then the last thing I want to say, and it's probably the thing that may get me the most trouble, especially with one of my picks, but it's the fact that I'm only going to be choosing one movie per franchise or per series. So I'm gonna use the Godfather trilogy for this one just as an example, also because it's not a horror movie, so it doesn't give any spoilers for the list. But let's say let's say I want to add the Godfather into this list. Of course, everybody loves Godfather's 1 and Godfather 2. Godfather 3, it's a movie. I can only choose either Godfather 1, 2, or 3. I can't choose the whole trilogy or two of the movies. I have to choose only one. And that also applies to remakes and the original. So let's use Scarface. For those who don't know, Scarface has an original film from like the 1930s. And then, of course, the 1980s one with Pacino. I'd have to choose, do I want to include the original or do I want to include the remake? So that's just kind of a ground rule I want to set up. Because if not, this list would be a little bit sequel heavy to a certain degree. So that's the only thing I want to say. There may be one exception to this list depending on how you view franchises, but we'll get to that very early on. So yeah, that's basically it for now. Now let's get on to the actual list. At number 50, we have Friday the 13th, the original 1980 Friday the 13th. So here's the thing. I'm actually not the biggest fan. It's not even more so that I'm not the biggest fan. It's just for whatever reason, I just don't tend to watch some of these early slasher movies, these pinnacle slasher movies. I'm kind of indifferent to a lot of them, if I'm being honest. But Friday the 13th, I've always kind of liked. I've seen it a handful of times. I actually saw it again about a week ago. And it has this charm to it. It's got this very nice charm, do-it-yourself charm to it that the filmmakers, had. I mean, which, it's kind of expected given how low budget this movie really is. It's one of those things that, and it's, it's kind of been talked about in Scream, where, you expect Jason Voorhees to be the killer, but no, it turns out to be his mother. And to a certain degree, that could be a twist. And that's one of those things that, yes, I knew from pop culture in general because of Scream. But even when the first time I saw it, it still kind of surprised me. I've always liked it because of that. And, again, it has this weird, certain charm to it, this do-it-yourself charm. And, also, it's Kevin Bacon's, dies. It's, one of his first roles, and he just dies. Pretty iconic death right there. And some other iconic deaths, like the axe to the head, just to name a few. And, of course, Mrs. Voorhees getting decapitated, another great one. Even if it is a bit cheesy. But yeah, it just has this nice charm to it that I've always enjoyed. At number 49, we have Wolf from 1994. So Jack Nicholson portrays a werewolf. I mean, here's the thing. We don't have that many werewolf movies in general. Much more so some that are actually good. And seeing Jack Nicholson as a werewolf, I just find it the weirdest thing. You have a movie with Jack Nicholson as a werewolf, and it just seems kind of wild because the other thing with this movie is that this was kind of a passion project for Jack Nicholson. If he always wanted to make this movie, and he finally made it in the 90s, and it's darkly comedic in certain parts. I just remember the scene where he's talking to his coworker very early on when he starts developing his werewolf powers. He's talking to his coworker and basically calling him out how he's always a drunk at work, and the coworker's like, "What the fuck? How does he know this shit? What the hell?" And I've always found that comedic. And the fight scene at the end between Jack Nicholson and God, what's his name? I forget right now, but David Spade. Is it David Spade? I forget right now. You're seeing the correct name right now. But the fight scene between them two at the farmhouse, this mansion farmhouse. Remember that it's actually really well done. It's actually pretty fun to see. Granted, there are more iconic horror movies with Jack Nicholson, but this one, don't sleep on this one. This one's actually really good. Next up, 48, Carnival of Souls from 1962. So by far, this has to be one of the most experimental movies I've seen in my life, especially for how early on it is in filmmaking history, I guess, which is weird because of some of the other films we're gonna have on the list. Carnival of Souls is just a really trippy movie. That's really how I describe it. It's a really trippy movie, and it's one of those movies that definitely inspired Psycho, or I was inspired by Psycho, and that's one of those things I was thinking about when I was watching this movie. I just really had that at the back of my mind. This was really inspired by Psycho, or this did inspire Psycho, depending on which one came out first. I'm forgetting right now. Sorry, sick. But regardless of that, it's just trippy, and the fact that you have this woman who like is seeing ghosts and nobody's like believing her basically, and she's attracted to this carnival of souls. I always found it really. I always found it really. I don't know if cool is the right word, but it's just like, yeah, interesting. It's just very interesting, and it's the obsession that she has with what's going on around her. You understand, but also from the outside looking in, it's like, lady, what the fuck is going on with you? And yeah, and honestly, I think this has some of the most creative editing I've seen in a movie thus far, especially for a movie of this time period in the 60s. So I also have to give it props to that as well. At number 47, we have Frankenstein 1931, the Universal monster movies. And this is where I said earlier that there is kind of caveat where maybe the franchise stuff. I'm only going to include one franchise, and this is the one where because I am going to have another Universal monster movie upcoming from this time period as well. I'm not going to lie, but so I'm like, that's the one thing. Like, does this count as a franchise or not? I don't know. But Frankenstein's one of those movies like I always heard so much about, and then when I finally saw it, I'm like, okay, I get it. I get it because it's about this guy or monster, whatever, who I mean, he didn't ask to be born. Let's start with that. He's just trying to traverse this new life, and everybody fucking hates him right off the bat because he was made under, I guess, less than desirable circumstances. I guess is the best way to put it. And then he accidentally kills a girl, Maria, which, let's be honest, he didn't know what the fuck he was doing. But let's be honest, Frankenstein in general is a tragic figure. He's always considered one of the most tragic figures in whether it be literary or cinematic history, I guess. Because again, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. This is based on a book. It is kind of just a tragedy of Frankenstein because he kind of just wants to be left alone. He didn't really ask to be born. He kind of just wants to be left alone, and he doesn't really understand life. He doesn't really understand the nuances of good and bad, and people just want to kill him right off the bat because of who he is. At number 46 from 1977, we have Suspiria. I'm gonna compare it a little bit to the remake that came out a few years back by Luca Guadagnino. The plot, in my opinion, the plot of the original Suspiria is kind of lacking. Okay, and I think that's something that the remake really improved upon. However, I think the thing that the original Suspiria has it loads of compared to the original is the fact that it's actually visually striking. It's actually something that's memorable. For as good as the remake of Suspiria is, story-wise, I'm not gonna lie, I can't remember a single fucking shot from that movie. It's very drab. And to a certain degree, it makes sense for what Luca Guadagnino is doing, but for the type of film that Suspiria is and it's known for, the original just has it in loads. I remember the colors, the visuals, even the score by Goblin. I remember it. You do have that iconic death with the ceiling, the glass ceiling. Again, the ending where all the witches, the convent of witches or whatever, they're basically dying off. And you really don't have that with the original, with the remake. Sorry, you don't really have those iconic moments with the remake. So even though the remake probably has a better story or a tighter story, the original just has so much more that's so much more memorable. Also, it's a giallo film, and I thought, let me at least have one giallo film in this list. So there is that because giallo is not really a genre I've looked at that often. I decided to watch a few giallo films this month, but by far Suspiria takes the cake on giallo. At number 45, we have Hereditary. Okay, this is just a downer of a movie in my opinion, and to a certain degree, that's why it's kind of so low on the list. Right? That's why it's 45. I just can't take how downer of a movie this is sometimes. But for that same reason, I really do appreciate what this movie is trying to say, especially when it comes to loss, death, loss, being lonely or alone. I can really appreciate how what this movie does. And for me, this movie is one of those movies that's like I look more about the smaller moments that maybe some people don't consider or don't really think about than as opposed to the big moments. And of course, this movie we all talk about the girl getting beheaded with the fucking street lamp, street pole, whatever. We talk about the ending and how it's just so fucking buck wild. But for me, some of the stuff I remember most is like the thing with Alex, the boy, and him like smoking pot with his friends. until he has like a fucking panic attack out of nowhere, and he's like, "Hey, hold my fucking hand. I don't feel so good. Hold my hand." Like for me, that's actually the scene I remember most, if I'm being honest. Or the scene where Gabriel Burns, who by the way I think is one of the most underrated performances in recent time. But you know the thing with Gabriel Burns and his character, he's like, I don't want to burn this book because this is driving me crazy. I don't want to play into this anymore. I'm not gonna burn the book. And then Tony Collette fucking grabs the books, chucks into the fireplace, and sets Gabriel Burns on fire, which kind of ironic given his name, Gabriel Burns. Yeah, and again, I think Gabriel Burns gives a very underrated performance in this. Everybody, of course, talks about Tony Collette and Alex Wolff. Everybody talks about them. But for me, if I'm being honest, my favorite performance in the movie is Gabriel Burns. If it's not for the fact that he's so grounded and, like, I guess, for lack of a better term, so done with whatever the fuck is going on around him, this movie doesn't work. At number 44, we have Dracula. So yeah, this is the thing. If you include the Universal monster movies as a whole, as one entire franchise like the MCU, where you have Iron Man and then you have Ant-Man and then you have Captain America, that this probably breaks my rule. But the way I'm thinking about this, all Frankenstein movies are one thing, all Dracula movies are one thing, and it's also all Dracula movies within this continuity, because you'll see what I mean later on. But yeah, Dracula, 1931. Yeah, I mean this is the vampire movie of all vampire movies. Bela Lugosi gives one of the most iconic movie performances, especially for horror movies. He gives one of the best horror movie performances of all time, one of the best movie performances of all time, in my opinion, because it's one of those things that, unlike Frankenstein, you don't really need to feel bad for Dracula. You just need to feel creeped out by him, and you do feel creeped out by him. You're creeped out by this mysterious figure of who he is, where he came from. That's the thing I can really talk about. It's just how creepy. And I think the one thing that pushes this over the edge for me is the fact that I've actually seen this movie in theaters, like straight up, a few years back. This was when I was in high school, but I did see this movie in theater, and it's one of those things that some of those images, because I saw them in theater, are just ingrained into my mind. And I think that's the one thing that pushes it up on top. And it's one of those movies that every time I watch it here at home, I'm taken back to that one theater experience. That's why I have it here on the list. At number 43, we have The Golem, How He Came Into the World in 1920. So yeah, silent films, man. We are going to have some silent films here on the list. This is going to be one of them. Here, silent films in general, I think are just, I don't want to say underrated because not many people talk about them to begin with. Not many people watch them to begin with. But the thing is, even with silent films, there is like a sort of hierarchy that people watch. We all watch Metropolis, or in horror's case, we all watch Dr. Caligari. We usually don't get past that for whatever reason. So I wanted to see, okay, what other silent films do we have? And The Golem, How It Came Into the World. I mean, this is basically the original Frankenstein by 11 years, if we're being honest. I just think that The Golem is just a bit more menacing, and there's stuff in that movie, editing-wise, I guess you could say, or even just filmmaking-wise, I'm impressed that they were able to do because of the time period, 1920, and how early it still is in the making of actual feature films. I mean, because feature films, by this point, it's just really starting to become a concept. Because not even 10 years ago, 1910, filmmaking was just short films. Now we're starting to do actual feature films, and The Golem is definitely one of the best. Even the design of the Golem, I think, is really cool. I've always liked it, just even from seeing images of it, and now actually seeing the movie, because I saw it for the first time a few weeks back. Actually seeing the movie, I'm like, yo, that actually looks really incredible. Next up, from 1999, The Sixth Sense. So, I don't know, is this considered a horror movie? I don't fucking know. And I'm not gonna lie, there are a few movies on this list where it's like, is this technically a horror movie? I don't fucking know. But I'm saying it's a horror movie, and I mean, okay, at its core, this is a horror drama. Let's be honest, this is a horror drama. I mean, this is one of M. Night Shyamalan's best movies, especially with the twist. I See Dead People. It's been memed, mocked to death for obvious reasons. But here's the thing: it's a twist that still works because it's one of those things that when I first saw it, I thought the second he sees dead people, Bruce Willis is gonna realize, oh shit, I'm dead. But that happens like halfway through the film, and you still have a loads more time before Bruce Willis actually realizes that he's dead. If anything, I think that's a better twist than the actual I See Dead People twist, if I'm being honest. And I don't know if that's something that's talked about per se. Now, I know a lot of people, when it comes to twist, they talk about, the fact that he finds out that he's actually dead, he's a ghost. But I think just the process behind it, because again, you find that out, I See Dead People like halfway through the movie, but you don't actually realize, or Bruce Willis doesn't actually realize, he's dead by the end of until the end of the movie, like the last couple of minutes. I mean, honestly, Cole Sears, one of the creepiest fucking child performances in a good way of all time. Everybody's here acting wise is fucking incredible. It's got some very great visuals, especially with the actual ghost. It's just a great movie all around. At number 41, we have Blackula, 1972. I mean, yeah, blaxploitation as a movie genre, movie movement. I guess I really don't know which word to use, but that's one of those things that I think I do urge a lot of people to actually seek out, because there are a lot of movies within this time period, within this genre movement, whatever you want to call it. That I think people do need to see. I think people just like only go to like Shaft or like Foxy Brown, and that's as far as they go. But like, check out some of the other movies around this genre. Blackula for the horror entry being one of them, and it's one of those things that the I forgot the actor right now, but the actor who portrays Blackula, he brings a certain gravitas to him because he's supposed to be a prince or a king of some forlorn nation, but now he's in modern times, and yes, he does have this certain air, creepy air around him that some of the characters notice. Some of the characters are like whatever about it, but I feel like the actor who portrays him is just really good at bringing that kind of higher. I don't know what the word would be, but like higher energy or like royal energy. I mean, yeah, he's a royal. So yeah, and again, it's similar to like Frankenstein to a certain degree. He is kind of a tragic figure because of the circumstances that led him to becoming a vampire, and then on top of that, what he's doing at modern day, which is trying to reunite with his wife, or better said, someone that looks like his wife. Although the actress who portrays his wife at the very beginning of the film is the same actress who portrays his love interest during modern times for the rest of the film, which I think is really cool when it comes to casting in that department. At number 40, we have Cube from 1997. I mean, honestly, Cube is one of the most what the fuck movies I've seen, in my opinion, because I mean, just think about it. You're trapped in this room, or I guess in this maze, puzzle, whatever, and you have to get the fuck out. You know, you have to find a way to get out. And I think the thing I like the most, in my opinion, is just how some of the people, how some of the survivors react to the situation at hand. Especially the one officer, the black guy, who like at the very beginning, he seems to be like a very genial, leader type of guy. You know, he's like, come on, everybody, let's get out. But slowly, he starts unraveling, and he basically becomes the main villain for the rest of the story. You know, he becomes like a borderline rapist or whatever because of his obsession with the one student, with the one girl. And it's one of those things that everybody fucking notices after a while. I've always liked that change. I've always liked to see how he went from being a good guy to a bad guy in this short span of time. And again, it's one of those things like what will people do when they're trapped in a situation? And I think it's a movie that a lot of other movies are eventually inspired by. Right off the bat, the one I can think of right now is this movie Circle from 2015. Definitely had to be inspired by Cube. I've never actually seen what they're inspired by, but I feel like it had to be inspired by Cube. And honestly, Cube is so good that it even got a remake just a few years back. I think the last year or the year before, it got a remake by China or something like that. So it's that great of a movie. In my opinion, it's a really good movie. It's a really good sci-fi movie as well in its own right. So definitely go check it out. At number 39, sticking with sci-fi, we have Videodrome 1983. I mean, David Cronenberg is in general just a genius, a mad genius when it comes to filmmaking, when it comes to horror, sci-fi, these type of films. Because Videodrome in its own right is a really good movie. It's a really scary movie, and it's one of those things that because of the way it's made, with the special effects and all that good stuff, there are shots that are like seared into my mind because of it. And even from the sci-fi angle of it, it's like it is creepy because you have like this video who's like that's slowly manipulating you into going crazy and doing whatever it needs you to do, and it's like, what the fuck? I mean, it just really is a really creepy film in that regard, and again, the effects for it are also just like top of the line. I mean, which is to be expected with a Cronenberg movie. Next up, 38, Tetsuo the Iron Man from 1989. If you want to talk about experimental movies, this has to take the list. This is one of the most experimental movies ever. And, beware of the title, has nothing to do with Iron Man, has nothing to do with Tony Stark. No, this is about a guy who is slowly being transformed into a machine or a robot, right? Iron Man. Honestly, like, this is it's body horror. It's straight up body horror. And I think this is a movie that I think it's almost taboo to talk about because of some of the other movies it's associated with, like Audition, for example. That's one, or like Ringu or whatever the fuck. And to a certain degree, this is one of those movies that I've always found it weird. That's kind of taboo to talk about. But I'm like, it's not that bad, all things considered. Yes, it's creepy. Yes, it has some iconic imagery, but just because of that, that's why it's kind of taboo. Like, what the fuck? I've always found it weird. And I mean, again, like the body horror in this movie specifically is just, it's just like, what the like, especially for 1989. What the fuck? Because like, yes, we did have The Fly a few years before this, but like the way The Fly uses body horror is so much different from how Tetsuo uses body horror. Because with Tetsuo, it's so much more visceral. It's so much more graphic. It's so much more in your face. I'm trying to scare the shit out of you, and I have to respect you for that. Next up, we have Haksan, Witchcraft Through the Ages, 1922, another silent film. This is kind of a weird movie to have on the list because it's kind of it's like a half documentary, half narrative. I guess is the best way to put it. I mean, online it says that this is technically a video essay, so take that for what you will. But yeah, as the title suggests, Witchcraft Through the Ages, it's a movie that talks about the witchcraft or the idea of witchcraft through the ages, from the beginning of time to modern day, or modern day in 1920. I think that's the one thing that kind of threw me off when I first saw it. The fact that it is like this half documentary thing. But realistically, and or that aside, it actually does work for the movie that this is trying to be the story that's trying to tell. And even then, the vignettes where it portrays the witchcraft are actually really well done and are actually really memorable in my opinion. And I'm just thinking about the one scene in the convent or the church or whatever, where the one nun is like freaking out because she thinks, oh my gosh, I have witchcraft, and the rest of the nuns there are like fucking running around like a bunch of headless chickens, trying not to get infected with witchcraft, which I find really funny. But yeah, no, definitely. Again, it's another side of the film. Again, we always talk about Dr. Caligari. Fuck Caligari for like 5 seconds. Look at something like this. Look at Gollum. Like, don't go for the obvious ones. Go for like something that. Go for a different type of silent film. Go for this. Caligari, great movie, but fuck it for a few moments. Go watch some other silent movies. Next up, number 36, A Ghost Story from 2017. Again, is this a horror movie? Has a ghost in it. Fuck it. And really, I mean, I guess you could say this is more of a psychological horror. At least that's the way I interpret it. At the very least, it's a dark drama. I mean, yeah, okay. Realistically, this is a psychological horror movie or existential horror movie, I guess. Better said, because really, it's about this ghost who's trying to figure out. Well, I don't know what the fuck he's exactly trying to figure out, if I'm being honest, but he's just trying to figure out, okay, what the fuck do I do as a ghost? And it's got some really creepy shots. Everybody talks about the pie eating scene or the cake eating pie cake, whatever. Some of the things I remember most is a party scene where you have there's one guy where you have this one guy who's just saying essentially what the movie's about, about life and death and all that stuff. I also remember the I don't know what you would call it, timeline through the ages at the very end, where he's like going through time from like the old Western days to modern day, or even the future where the house, originally is just like a plot of land, and then at the very end of time, it becomes a skyscraper building. And I mean, that's the stuff I remember most about this movie. The existential dread, the existential horror behind it all. That's what I remember about this movie. Next up, we have 1973, The Exorcist. I mean, okay, how can I make a top 50 favorite horror movies, without including The Exorcist into this list? I mean, come on. But realistically, this is one of the best movies of all time in general, and one of the best horror movies of all time because of that. It just so happens that it's number 35 on this list. In a lot of ways, this is a very surprising movie. It's a very surprising movie because even to this day, right now in 2023, it's surprising to have this little girl be possessed by the devil. It's surprising to have her do the actions she does. It's surprising to the point that you have these priests who are trying to expel the demon from her. The power of Christ compels you, and they still fail at the end of the day. I mean, up until the very last moments in the movie, they basically fail throughout the whole movie, and it's a movie that I've come to appreciate over time. It's basically how I'll go with that. It's a movie that I've come to appreciate over time. I know the first few times I saw it, it's not that I didn't like it. I just didn't think much of it. Like I could still say, oh yeah, this is a good movie. But in my last couple of rewatches of the movie in the past year or two, I've really come to appreciate this movie for what it does and how it does it. Next up, we have The Lighthouse from 2019, Robert Eggers. Now, Robert Eggers in general is one of my favorite modern directors right now. I really like what he does in some of his movies, and The Lighthouse has to be the best one from of his movies. Again, you have these two guys who are isolated in this island in this lighthouse, and they have to live with each other. They're both slowly losing their goddamn minds because your isolation. You guys are isolated for an extended period of time, and just the chaos that kind of comes with it. Them bitching and arguing about who gets to watch the actual light bulb, or if one of them likes the other's lobster, or don't kill the birds and all that shit. It's kind of a buck wild movie at the end of the day, but I think the main thing with this is the fact that the actors, Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe, they sell it in such a believable way. that you buy the fact that yes, they are going crazy. They are crazy. What the fuck? I think the performances in this movie are some of the best, and it's one of those things that really, really sells this movie. Next up, we have Reanimator from 1985. As far as zombie movies goes, this has to be one of the most craziest ones because in most zombie movies you have the dead, they die, they come back to life, and that's it. But no, this one, yeah, this fucking motherfucker Herbert West, he's willingly reanimating the dead right now. It's like, bro, why the fuck are you doing this? Yo, let the dead rest, goddamn. And I mean, straight up, I mean, Herbert West in his own right is a villain. Let's not get that shit twisted. He is a villain. I think he's one of the more charismatic and interesting villains that horror has, especially when it comes to zombies or the zombie genre. But he is a villain, and honestly, his performance, I forget the actor right now, but his performance in the movie is, I think it's just the right amount of cheese and the right amount of seriousness at the same time. And it's part of the reason why he's just become an iconic fixture in horror. Herbert West, the character, has become such an iconic fixture in horror. Furthermore, with this movie, the effects made for this movie are also really great. I mean, I just think about all the different zombies that we see throughout the movie, especially the one scene where they're at like the morgue and they're reanimating every single body there. And if you look at the behind the scenes stuff, they talk about how they want each zombie to look like it died from a different thing. Like, oh yeah, this one died in a car crash, this one got burned to death, whatever. And I think that attention to detail really helps this movie in that regard. Next up, we have Chopping Mall from 1986. I mean, I'm just gonna put it like this: it's a fun, cheesy movie that I always enjoy. That's really the simple fact of the matter of it. It's a fun, cheesy movie that I enjoy, and the fact that you are getting killed by a bunch of security guard robots is kind of funny. I've always found that funny. I mean, this is definitely one of the cheesiest movies out there. I mean, yeah, that's really all I have to say. It's a very cheesy movie. It's a fun, cheesy movie. Go check it out. Yeah, I mean, that's really it. I actually do like the camaraderie between all the friends in this movie. Even if they're not all the best actors, I do like camaraderie between all the friends. And that's really all I have to say. I mean, yeah, it's fun. It's cheesy. Go check it out next. At number 31, we have X from 2022. I do think that technically speaking, Pearl is maybe the better movie from both a technical and story perspective. But I just enjoy X a whole lot more. It's X. That's all I really have to say. I mean, Mia Goth. I mean, goddamn, between this movie and Pearl, she gave some incredible performances, which are just like, what the fuck? And then I really can't wait to see Maxine whenever that movie comes out. But yeah, like, I mean, honestly, this is one of those movies that kind of came out of nowhere and fucking made a statement. And that's basically the best way to put it. I mean, X, again, between Pearl and X, it's very hard to decide, but my pick is for X. Also, the characters here are just a bit more likable. I mean, we actually do get characters here. Whereas in Pearl, you get Mia Goth's character, you get the sister character, you get the projectionist. But here you have a whole group of characters. And I think there's also the fact that they're talking about filmmaking. Granted, it's porn, but the fact that they're talking about filmmaking for a huge extended period of time, I kind of like I like that aspect as well. At number 30, we have The Host from 2006. Now, before I actually get into this movie, there is a part of me that for the longest time I was trying to justify Parasite because that's such a great movie, but it's not really a horror movie. It's more of a thriller, which I don't think really fits into the parameters of this list. So I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. I still want to have a Bong Joon-ho movie. The Host it is. And don't get me wrong, The Host is still a great movie. Like, even when I went to include Parasite, this movie was always going to be on the list. The Host is definitely a movie I think everybody should watch. It's one of those that it's kind of weird to say this, but it's kind of underrated when it comes to Bong Joon-ho's filmography. Of course, a lot of people talk about Parasite. A lot of people also talk about Okja or Snowpiercer or Memories of a Murder. And oddly enough, this is one that kind of gets looked over, despite it being arguably his next biggest, best film in the lineup. And I mean, the Glomo, that's the name of the monster. The Glomo is, I'll say this much, it is very iconic in my opinion. And also just a social commentary in this movie, because this is a movie that's very socially conscious, has a lot of heavy social commentary. It's definitely something to look out for, especially if you know your Korean history or just history between America and Korea relationships. Definitely check that out. And also, I mean, at the very beginning, we have an appearance by Scott Wilson, Herschel from The Walking Dead. Rest in peace, man. That's always a nice plus, to see him in a movie. Honestly, all the performances around this movie across the board are great. Definitely go check it out. Next up, number 29, the Rocky Horror Picture Show. This has horror in the title. Get the fuck out of here. I have heard people say, oh, this isn't a horror movie because it's a musical. I'm like, that's the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard. The thing with the Rocky Horror Picture Show, I think the one thing I like this about more is the fact that, don't get me wrong, I do like the movie, but I feel like the experiences I've had with the movie are more memorable than the movie itself, if that makes sense. Because I've done shadow cast or the shadow shows for this movie on a number of occasions, both as an audience member and as a performer, and it's very fun. I think because of that, I just hold it in a more special place in my heart than just simply watching the movie. Now, don't get me wrong, watching the movie on its own is still fucking great. I mean, you have some iconic songs right there. You know, Time Warp, I think, obviously is the best one. Let's do the Time Warp now. We also have the one song, I forget what it's called right now, but it's the one where you know they're discovering what sex is essentially. Um, touch me, touching me, you know, touch me, touch me, touch me, touch me. I wanna be touched. Is that one actually called Touch Me? Because right now I'm thinking Touch Me, but I'm like, nah, is that no? I'm confusing that for the song from Spring Awakening, where it's like Touch Me just like that. I mean, honestly, horror musicals in general, you don't really see that often. You'll see another one later down on the list, but Rocky Horror Picture Show, more so because of the experiences I've had with the movie than the actual movie itself. That's why it's so high on the list. And again, the actual movie itself. I mean, Tim Curry gives an iconic performance like he always does. It has to be on the list. Has to be on the list. Next up, we have An American Werewolf in London. Look, The Wolfman maybe the original werewolf movie, but this is the werewolf movie. So much so that this is the reason why we have best special effects in the Oscars. That's how iconic this movie is. It literally made a whole category at the Oscars just so it could be recognized. So take that for what you will. And you know, don't get me wrong, the transformation scene in this movie is iconic. It is one for the ages. But that aside, like the whole movie is just really good, and it's basically a dark comedy, which is something that I didn't initially expect when I first saw the movie. I didn't expect it to be that comedic. I was expecting this yeah, fun, cheesy movie. But I guess I just didn't expect how comedic it was actually going to be. And it's very, very comedic. You know, dark comedy and all of that. I mean, you have a whole dream sequence where, with like the Nazis, are killing off the main guy's family or some shit like that. So you know, it's very darkly comedic. And yeah, the one thing I don't necessarily like about this movie, and even then I say that with hesitancy, is the romance between the main guy and the girl. Mostly because like I feel it happens just a touch bit too quickly, but also within time constraints of the movie and the fact that they only have like 3 days to tell this story, you know, within the context of the movie, you know, it makes sense why they would fall in love, so to speak, so quickly. And also, I mean, it has some great deaths in the movie as well, of course. Of course, Buddy getting mauled by the wolf at the very beginning, yes. But even when the main guy, I forget his name right now, but even when the main guy transformed into a werewolf and he's killing off people all around London, I mean, that's some scary shit. That's some really cool stuff. And it's funny because I've actually heard this movie be called a slasher, which I found very fucking wild. But the person who said that this was a slasher, it makes sense why they would say it's a slasher. I heard this in Eyebrow Cinema. It's that podcast, Eyebrow Cinema. One of the episodes they did last year for slashers, and the girl they had there as a guest, she said, "No, this is a slasher," and it's one of the most funniest things. But definitely do get a listen, and like she makes some compelling arguments. I'm not gonna lie. So you know, if I ever make a top 10 slashers, does this make the list? I don't know. We'll see. Next up at number 27, we have The Omen. So it's one of the things that I think a lot of people are like, is which one's better, The Omen or The Exorcist? And for my money, it's The Omen. And I think part of it has to do with the fact that this is kind of an underrated movie, if I'm being honest, which is weird because this is The Omen. But no, if I'm being honest, this is kind of an underrated movie. And I think part of it has to do with the fact that The Exorcist kind of takes its theme so much from it because they came out at the same time, similar subject matter with a kid who gets possessed by the devil. You know, even though it's only been like 3 years apart, I still think that this takes a lot of steam from The Omen. I mean, The Omen. I would say the kid in The Omen, Damien, is loads more creepier than Reagan, and which again, if you know Reagan, what the fuck? Like, how can that be creepier? But like, I think it's the fact that he's just so is a fucking child because Reagan, she's like what 12, whereas Damien, he's like what 5 or 6 or whatever. I mean, I just find him to be a lot more creepier, and Gregory Peck gives an iconic performance. I've always liked Gregory Peck as an actor, and just I mean, I think just the nuance or the novelty of seeing him in a horror movie, it's just kind of odd. But once you get past that, it's very much a really great movie, and he sells it all. Like he sells it all from not wanting to kill this child originally to like going fuck it, I'm gonna kill my child because it's getting very Final Destination all of a sudden. Like straight up, like, and that is the thing. Like Final Destination 3 was actually heavily inspired by this movie Omen when it comes to like the way that the deaths are portrayed. I guess is the best way to word it because throughout this whole movie, right before somebody dies, they take a picture and it shows a sign of how they're gonna die, and that's something that happens in Final Destination 3. I searched that up, like, this had to be inspired by it, and yep. I'd be shocked if it wasn't inspired by it. I mean, The Omen is just really creepy, and I'm gonna go with that. It's really creepy, has a really creepy child. Go from there. At number 26, Shaun of the Dead. So yeah, we're basically done with the first 25 movies here. Shaun of the Dead, great way to round it off here. And honestly, I mean, it's a horror comedy, it's a zombie comedy. It's one of the best zombie comedies there is. I mean, what else do you want me to say? Nick Frost and Sean Pegg. God damn. Nick Frost and Sean Pegg did great with this movie. Bringing this is in the early 2000s when zombies were really brought into the forefront, and they brought a different taste of zombies during this time when there were all a bunch of fast running assholes like they were in 28 Days Later and the Dawn of the Dead remake. This kind of harkens back to like your classic zombies with a touch of British humor, and it's fun. I like it. It's always been fun. I always liked it, and that museum fucking queen, to kill zombies is fucking hilarious. And here's the thing: there are some sad deaths, in this movie when Nick Frost dies, in the basement. That's actually a very heartfelt scene, if you ask me. And it's really well done. I mean, too bad he's still trapped in like a fucking garage at the end of the movie or the shed. That kind of sucks, but like, hey, I mean, you want to have your zombified buddy around? Best way to have him is to have him stuck in a shed. Overall, it's a really fun movie. Definitely go check it out if you haven't already. And we enter the top 25 with Final Destination 5. Now, if you saw my list last week where I told you guys about my top 15 favorite Final Destination deaths, you guys would know that I'm not someone who typically goes to watch franchises all that often. Maybe a trilogy, but not like an entire franchise. And I don't know why. Just something that I've always done. I'm less inclined to watch an entire franchise that's like 7 movies long, for example, than just a simple trilogy. So Final Destination in general is just one of those. It's one of the few franchises I've actually seen in its entirety. And kind of going from there, Final Destination 5 is clearly the one I like the most. And part of it has to do with the fact that between this one and the second one, Final Destination 2 and Final Destination 5, these are the ones I saw a lot when I was a kid because they were always on TV. It took me a while. It took me a while to see Final Destinations 1, 3, and 4. I think the one thing that Final Destination 5 has over Final Destination 2, it's the fact that it's just a simple story. Unlike Final Destination 2, where they had the twist where everybody's dying backwards, and you kind of need to take some time to adjust to that, Final Destination 5 it makes it very simple. Like, hey, here's a disaster, this is the order that people die, now they die. And really the twist that they have here in this movie, it's the fact that if you kill somebody else, you take their life, which, I mean, I guess to a certain degree makes sense. And it's kind of surprising that they haven't done this beforehand, but they're doing it now. And honestly, Final Destination 5 arguably has some of the better characters in the series in general, has some of the more iconic deaths, especially the gymnasium death, goddamn. And it's just a great all-around movie. Next up, we have The Invisible Man from 2020. God, like this is one of the few movies I saw in 2020 in theaters. I only saw like 3 or 4 movies in 2020 in theaters before the world went to shit, and this was one of the few. And God, like this is like the original Invisible Man is already a masterpiece in its own right, but the fact that they were able to do what they did in this movie and just improve upon it and make it modern, not have it be he turns invisible because of a potion, but no, he's invisible because of technology. I thought was such a great way to update the story, and then have this abuse story in the background of it was just, I think, was a brilliant way to again modernize the story. And the performances here are across the board are great, from Elizabeth Moss to Aldous Hodges to the main guy who portrays the Invisible Man. I forget his name right now, but I think everybody here brings their fucking A game. And again, another movie with some iconic deaths. Of course, the one in the restaurant where the sister gets her neck slit with a knife. It's just like one of the most what the fuck moments in a movie. The police shootout halfway through the movie is also another great series of deaths. Overall, it's just great. It's just great, and I just love the way they're able to modernize it. Next up, at number 23, we have Poltergeist 1982. Now, here's the funny thing is with this movie is that when I first saw it a few years back, I didn't really care for it. I saw it and I was like, okay, cool, that's whatever. And I think it's just rewatching it this year. I've seen it twice this year. That's really helped. Again, it's really helped me appreciate this movie. And I think the thing with this movie is that when I first saw it, I had some like preconceived notions or thoughts on what the movie what the movie was actually about. And now that I know what the movie is actually about, I'm now able to set my expectations at a better level, and I think that's what's helped me enjoy this movie a lot more. And I mean, here's the thing: this is like baby's first horror movie for sure. If you want to introduce a kid to horror, give them the Poltergeist, the original one too. I mean, here's the thing: even for it being like a children's horror movie, so to speak, it still has some iconic moments, like the kid almost dying in the tree, for example. The whole fucking thing with the pool and the skeletons, like that's iconic at the end of the day. And they're here. I mean, that's it's weird because that's like kind of a cute line the way she says it, but it's also very fucking creepy. The one thing I don't really like about this movie, and I'm kind of in the minority about this, but that's the fact that the what the fuck is she, like the median or whatever, the very short lady who comes in halfway through the movie, Zelda, I think was her name. I feel like she kind of puts the movie to like a screeching halt, and I kind of just want her to get the fuck off screen. And I'll be honest, I kind of think she gave a weak performance, but I'm definitely in the minority about that because a lot of people love her character from what I see online, and I'm just like, why? That's the one major gripe I have with this movie, but that's besides the point. Everything else about this movie is really good. I really like it. It's got some memorable moments. Of course, the thing in the room where all the objects are spinning around. Because of the fucking portal. Everything about this is just great. Next up, we have The Faculty from 1998. And this is a movie that I don't hear anybody talk about, if I'm being honest, which is weird because this movie has the most out there fucking cast that will get famous in just like a couple of years. You have like Elijah Wood, you have Usher, you have Jon Stewart, you have Jordana Brewster, and I think Sean William Scott. They're all in this movie, and it's like right before they all became famous. And it's one of the most what the fuck casts any movie has for like pre-famous people. But even that aside, like this is legitimately a good movie. Like it's a very fun movie, and for me, the one scene that's ingrained in my mind, and I don't know why. I guess this is because of how great it's done. It's the scene where after they kill Jon Stewart, they're all trying to escape. The kids are all trying to escape to a car to get the fuck off school, and they're just being observed by everybody else who's already been invasion of the body snatched essentially. Everybody's like looking around them, like calling their name, and I don't know why, but the way that scene is done, I just really like. I've always found it creepy, and it's one of those things that's always been ingrained in my mind. It's just really well done, and I mean overall the whole movie is done. The fucking thing at the end where it's Elijah Wood fighting against this fucking demon monster, whatever the fuck, that looks like it's straight out of the Host. Even though this came out years before the Host was even a concept, it's like it's just like what the fuck. To a certain degree, this is my comment on this movie. What the fuck is this movie? It's like again, it's a very wild movie, and I've always liked it. I've always found it charming because of that. Next up, arguably the cheesiest movie on the list, Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I mean, the title alone just tells you how fucking cheesy this movie is. Like, god damn. You have killer clowns from outer space, and it's one of those things that they even joke about it in the movie itself. Or you're telling me we have killer clowns from outer space? Get the fuck out of here. I mean, yeah, just like Chopping Mall, I really don't know what to say about this movie aside from the fact that it's cheesy and I like it. It's very fun. The effects in this movie are actually surprisingly well done, which is weird because there's not that many effects. I mean, you do have the costume effects for the actual clowns, and I think that's well done. But like that aside, I hesitate to say there's not that many effects, and then I find out, oh no, wait, everything was an effect. But I think the one thing I really find memorable about this movie, when it comes to the effects, is like the cocoons, the cotton candy cocoons. When you take off a piece of cotton candy, you just see the bloody body that's underneath it. And I think that's really creepy. I think that's really cool. The way that's done is really cool. And of course, the way that the clowns look, goddamn amazing. They look creepy as shit. And like, if I could dress up as one of the killer clowns from outer space for Halloween, that'd be that'd be amazing. It'd be a pain in the ass to do because of the fucking mask, but I would love to do that one day. At number 20, we have Doctor Sleep. So yeah, I could get in trouble right now because of my franchise rule. So because of that, The Shining isn't on this list. It's Doctor Sleep. And here's the thing: I like The Shining. Don't get me wrong. I like The Shining, but I like Doctor Sleep just a whole lot better. I think the one thing with Doctor Sleep that it has over The Shining is the fact that I just feel a bit more engaged in Doctor Sleep than I feel in The Shining, which is weird because Shining has Jack Nicholson, who's one of my favorite actors of all time. I think the thing with Doctor Sleep too that had to do is the fact it had to be a sequel both to The Shining, but also to a certain extent it had to honor the book, which was a sequel to the novel version of Shining, which was so wildly different than the movie, and it had to essentially be a sequel for both, and I think he succeeded. And honestly, Rose Hat is one of the best villains, modern villains we've had in movies in general. Ewan McGregor as Danny Torrance, which is great because you do think about it, like what will happen to Danny Torrance as life goes on, and I guess he will become alcoholically depressed. And there are some iconic shots here. When I forget the girl's name, but the little girl, she's like walking over Earth, I guess, like or floating over Earth. I really don't know how to explain that. And going against Rose the Hat, that's iconic. Her, Rose the Hat fucking going buck wild in that fucking grocery store. The whole thing with when all the because they are vampires. When all the vampires are basically sucking soul out of, is it Jacob Tremblay's character? Yeah, them sucking the life out of him. And then if you actually look at the behind the scenes videos for it, they're like, oh no, we were legitimately scared because of this kid's performance. He was like, what the fuck? And even Cliff Curtis in this movie, like him just being the helpful friend, him buying into Danny's like buck ass wild story and being a fucking bro. Like he literally met this guy like maybe 24 hours ago, and he's already killing vampires with them. And then sadly he dies. I mean, it's honestly a great movie, and I'll be honest, I've seen Doctor Sleep more than I have seen The Shining. And you'd expect, oh, if I see The Shining, I'll see Doctor Sleep. But no, sometimes I'll pop into Doctor Sleep over The Shining. And again, it just draws me in more than Shining. That's the thing with it. Next up, we have The Witch. And yes, I'm calling it The Witch, not The Witch, because it has two V's in it. And I know that the reason it's written like that is because back in Old English times, like in the 1800s, W wasn't really a fucking concept, so they only had two V's. But I don't care. I'm calling it The Witch. But besides the point, this is basically a psychological horror drama, essentially. And it honestly succeeds. And it's one of those movies that I can't see people getting bored by it because of what it's doing, because of the time period that takes place, and because it's such a slow burn of a movie. But because it's such a slow burn of a movie, I think that's the reason I like it so much. And because you're slowly discovering what the fuck is going on. Why did the baby disappear? Where is all this demonic shit coming from? What possessed the little boy, the brother, to act or behave the way he's doing? It's one of those movies that I don't typically like or care for slow burn movies. I kind of get annoyed by them, if I'm being honest. Yeah, I'm not really too drawn in by slow burn movies usually, but I feel like this is one of those movies that really does it in the right way. And also, it has Anya Taylor Joy. I'm gonna add that as well. And she's honestly a great actress. She's one of my favorite actresses of all time. And I'm not gonna lie, celebrity crush. She is like one of my celebrity crushes. Anya Taylor Joy for sure. Next up, we have 1986 The Fly. So this is the Fly remake, not the original from like 1950 or 60, whatever. This is the remake with Jeff Goldblum. And I'll say this very fast. I do like the original Fly. I do think it's a really well done movie. I think it's a really fun movie. But I think everything that the original Fly was trying to explore was so much better explored in this movie. Just the body horror aspects of this, of what it means to be transformed into a fly and how that affects your life. I think it's just so much more well done in this movie. The one thing I don't really care for this movie is kind of the same thing with American Werewolf. I don't buy the fucking romance. I feel like it happens way too quickly, and even more so in this movie than in American Werewolf. Because in this movie, I just don't buy the fact that they'd be romantically interested in each other past like a one night stand. Because he becomes a fly, because he's a dick for most of the movie, and he becomes a fly very quickly. And I'm like, when did this romance really happen? I think that's really the one gripe I have against this movie. That I just don't buy the romance. And I think it's one of those things that had they just been friends, really good friends, they had that one night together, but past that, it's like they're just really good friends. I would have bought this movie just a little bit more. This is The Fly. This is the body horror movie. And the body horror in this movie is just fucking amazing. It's great. And I just love the reaction that the coworker, I forget his name right now, but when the coworker sees Jeff Goldblum as The Fly, he's like, what the fuck am I seeing? He's like, what the hell? And if I'm being honest, and maybe this is just me, I kind of agree with the coworker to a certain degree. Like, you're literally spending your time with this fucking guy who's like practically abusing you. What? And like, granted, the coworker isn't, he's not a fucking saint in his own right, because he is an asshole too. But like, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of agree with Cole. But like, again, back to the effects. The effects are great. It's amazing. It's the body horror movie, for the ages, and I don't think it'll ever be topped in that regard. Tetsuo gave it a run for its money. Not gonna lie. Actually, did Tetsuo come out before this? Right? Let me check. Double check. Yeah. I mean, no, it came out after this, like by 3 years. Even though Tetsuo is more creepy, it's more effective. This is the body horror movie. Next up, we have Dark City from 1998. Now, if I'm being honest, this is a movie that maybe most people wouldn't consider horror, but I think it's a horrific movie. And Alex Pryors, the director of this movie, he said he was inspired by horror movies when making this movie, and you could definitely feel that. Now, it's not traditionally considered a horror movie, but it definitely is. I mean, I kind of want to say that it has that whole invasion of the body snatchers thing going on as well, but even more so in a more terrifying manner because the aliens, they're not necessarily body snatching you. They're not like taking over you per se. Like, time stops and one day you could literally be a hotel manager and the next day you could be a newspaper seller. You forget the fact that you're a hotel manager, for example, and just the horror behind that, and it's really creepy. And it's I think I rewatched this movie for the first time in years because I've only seen this twice. Back when I first saw it in high school, and just a few weeks back. The thing that always stuck with me is just the horror behind that. The fact that you could have literally a completely new life, by the end of the day or end of the night, and not remember your former life. And I always found that creepy. And you could definitely say that this is more of a neo noir, I guess you could say. But for my money, it's a horror movie. It's very creepy, and again, you do get some horrific elements. The fucking monsters, I forget what they're called right now. But the monsters, the alien race who are doing all this, I don't want to say you understand their motivation. Like, not that you agree with them, but you understand why they're doing it. But you definitely don't agree with their motivation. And even the way they look, it's just so fucking creepy. And I don't know, it's just weird that it's kind of weird for me not to call this a horror movie when so many elements of it are just so fucking horrific. And it's definitely a movie that's slept on because this came out right before The Matrix. And I mean, The Matrix, yes, it's not a horror movie, but it explores a lot of similar concepts. Because of that, kind of gets ignored. So yeah, definitely go watch Dark City. It's a very creepy action horror sci-fi movie. If you haven't seen it already, go check it out for sure. Next up, we have Scooby Doo on Zombie Island, 1998. If you saw top 10 favorite zombie movies, you will know that this is for me just a movie from my childhood. I'm a huge fan of Scooby Doo in general. I'm a huge fan of zombies in general. And this is a movie I've seen ever since I was a child, even before I knew the concepts of horror or anything like that. This is a movie I've always seen, and I've always appreciated it because of that, and I've always liked it. And I'm not gonna lie, it's still a movie that holds up. Like, definitely go watch it. It's a movie that holds up even for what it is, and it's definitely one of the better Scooby Doo movies, properties, whatever you want to call it, because there are the TV shows and the comics. But it's definitely one of the better Scooby Doo things in the franchise. So much so that they went back to Zombie Island like 2 years ago and made a sequel to it for some fucking reason. And everybody says that the sequel fucking sucks because they were trying to modernize this fucking story for some fucking reason. Which I'm like, what the hell do you mean they were trying to modernize it? And some of it had to do with the animation, some of it had to do with the story. And apparently the sequel like ignored story elements from this movie. I'm like, what the fuck? Yeah, no. Zombie Island, definitely one of the it's one of my favorite zombie movies, straight up. And because of that, it's one of my favorite horror movies. And again, it's because of the fact that it's a movie I saw as a child. For me, it's a childhood movie. I mean, yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. It's a childhood movie. If you don't like it, get over it. It's my list. At number 15, we have Silenced. So I think by far, of any movie here, this is the one that you can argue for sure that's not a horror movie. I'm going to be honest. This one may not be a horror movie. It's definitely a drama. It's a dark drama. At the very least, I think we can all agree if you've seen this movie, it's a dark drama. The reason I'm including it in this list is because for me, it's just one of the most disturbing movies I've ever seen in my life. And here, because this movie is not widely well known, so let me just tell you what it's about. Basically, you have this fictional town in South Korea, and you have this teacher who's going into this deaf school, so a school for people who are deaf, these kids who are deaf, who they can't hear shit. And very quickly, he realizes that some of these kids are being abused by the staff at the school. The reason I call this a horror movie, and to a further extent why I think it's one of the most disturbing movies I've seen, period, it has to really do because of the tone. the feel, the atmosphere that this movie gives off, right from right off the bat, that it gives off this really weird atmosphere, and at first you don't really understand why. Why is it giving you this kind of atmosphere? But as the movie progresses, you understand. Oh shit, this is a really, oh this is fucked. This is really fucked. And for me, there's a scene at the very end of the movie because halfway through the movies, the perpetrators of the crime, the perpetrators who are abusing the children, which is the school principal or principals, because it's like two people, they get arrested and they're going by through trial. There's one of the kids, one of the guys, one of the boys. It's found out that his testimony can't be used in court because his parents basically signed an NDA. They got bought off, and it's a very heartbreaking scene where he's like, why is my testimony not allowed? Why it's not fair? They need to be held accountable, and it's a very heartbreaking scene. But the thing that happens immediately right afterwards is that he tries to kill one of the. Well, he doesn't. He doesn't try. He does kill one of the principal. No, not one of the teachers. Sorry, he kills one of the teachers who was abusing him. Again, it's not. It's not. If I'm being honest, it's not a horror movie. If I'm being honest, it's not a horror movie. But it's definitely one of the most disturbing movies I've seen. Period. It's one of those movies that I've only seen it once, and it still disturbs the shit out of me. Like I'll occasionally go back and watch a scene, but I don't know if I'm ready to watch the whole movie. And again, this probably isn't considered a horror movie. It's definitely a crime movie first and foremost. But again, just because it's so fucking disturbing, I have to put it on this list. I can't go. I can't do this list and not include this movie. It's it's the type of movie that Spotlight and Sound of Freedom wished they were. Spotlight and Sound of Freedom, they have their moments that are horrific, but that's the thing. Those are just moments. Whereas this, it's the whole movie. I don't care if it's not considered a horror movie. Definitely go check it out. Also because especially after this movie came out, South Korea actually made laws because of this movie. They to help victims of of sexual assault, especially children. On top of everything else, it actually did something for the better good of humanity. Definitely go check it out. Go check it out. Next up, we have Dawn of the Dead 2004. So, yeah, I feel like I'm going to get in trouble for this one because Night of the Living Dead, the original one, is such an iconic movie. It's the zombie movie. And even to a further extent, the Dawn of the Dead original movie, again, is iconic in its own right. But again, I have the franchise rule, and this is this is the movie pick for all of the Romero zombie movies, even if it's a remake. Now I don't care. I grew up on Dawn of the Dead, the remake. I didn't see the original Dawn of the Dead to just a few years back. For me, this was one of my gateway horror movies and gateway zombie movies for sure. I'll admit, I watched it recently and I kind of thought. I mean, I've been thinking about this for some time, but I feel like the story in this movie could be tighter. It's something that I've really began to think about recently. But honestly, I don't really care because it's just so fucking fun to watch. I love the camaraderie between the survivors. Between Sarah Polly's character and is it Anna? Yeah, between Anna and Michael, and even Ving Rhames' characters, him being a badass. That whole movie, I just love the camaraderie between everyone. Even Burrell is it Steve Burrell, Ty Burrell, whatever his name is from Modern Family. It's so fucking random to see him in this movie as just this fucking asshole. And I've never seen Modern Family. I've seen like clips of it, and he's such a lovable presence. So to see him be like this fucking asshole in this whole movie, it's just like very funny, very weird. Again, gateway zombie movie, gateway horror movie for me. That's why I like it. So it's one I've seen on and off for years now, for about 10 years. It's got to be on the list. And also something funny now, we can officially say that Sarah Polley, who was in this movie, is now an Oscar-nominated actress or screenwriter, technically. Not even, no, Oscar winning. She won for Women Talking. So that's a very funny detail now. That, oh yeah, we have an actual Oscar winner in this fucking 2004 zombie movie. What the fuck? I just find that kind of funny. All right, next up, we have Carrie. So yeah, these next couple movies are all going to be Stephen King. So get ready for the Stephen King section. Yes, we already had Dr. Sleep before this, but here's where some of the more iconic Stephen King movies come in. And Carrie, I mean, for me, Carrie's just a tragic figure. I think we all know that. Carrie is a tragic figure. Piper Laurie, rest in peace, who portrayed her mother, she's iconic in this movie. And if you hear the stories behind it, where she thought she was making a comedy, which is like one of the most wild fucking things. Like, how do you think this is a comedy? But whatever. But I think because of that, because she thought it was a comedy, because she gave such an out there performance, it actually helps this movie to be better, essentially, because you have this so out there mother figure, controlling mother figure, versus this like demure little girl who's still trying to find her way, and it's just amazing. I just like it, and Carrie herself is just such a relatable character. And then I just fucking remembered that John Travolta's in this fucking movie. And that's kind of a wild thing. John Travolta's in Carrie. What the fuck? But yeah, I mean, even here's the thing. Even John Travolta, and I forget who portrays his girlfriend. Like they do great in this movie, being the bullies. I mean, I just go back to that. Carrie is a tragic figure. Carrie, that's what I go back to. Carrie is a tragic figure. Of course, the prom scene where she's killing everyone left, right, and center. Goddamn, like that is a very horrific scene. I'm not gonna lie. It's one of those things I'm always kind of like slightly aware in the back of my mind when I'm in like a party, or it's like, is someone gonna go carry on me? Am I gonna die because of Carrie? Essentially, not gonna lie, that's something that's always in the back of my mind. Low key, great performances all around. And Piper Laurie, who recently just died, rest in peace. You did a great job as Mrs. White. Next up, we have Christine. Now, I'm not gonna lie. There is a part of me that wants to put Carrie over Christine. I'm not, and to there is a part of me that wants to do that because for me, I think Carrie is the better written movie. But the reason I have Christine over Carrie is because I understand the main character a bit more. I forget his name right now, but I understand the main character a bit more and his obsession with the car. Because I'm not gonna lie, I was bullied in high school, and sometimes you have this obsession. For him, it's cars. Christine, for me, it'd be movies and filmmaking. But sometimes you have this obsession that people will use against you, and because I think it just comes down to that. I just relate a bit more to the main character, Arnie. That's his fucking name, Arnie Cunningham. I just relate to Arnie a bit more than I do to Carrie, if I'm being honest. And again, very tragic figure. Even when he goes to his fucking James Dean fucking phase, quotation marks on James Dean, when he's trying to go through his fucking badass phase, I know a lot. I can relate to that too because there is a moment when I was bullied where I tried to feel like a badass and tell people like "fuck you," I don't give a shit about what you think about me, and much to my detriment, and similar to Arnie, much to his detriment as well. The only difference between me and Arnie is the fact that I still don't have a girlfriend, whereas Arnie was able to get a girlfriend. That's the only difference. But no, like real talk, like that's the thing. I can actually relate to Arnie, and he is a tragic figure. And honestly, Christine, the actual car, Christine, really cool. Not gonna lie, really cool. It's up there with the DeLorean as most iconic cars in film history, and the fucking Scoop Mystery Machine. It's definitely up there, and the effect, the shot of the car repairing itself is really cool. And if you look at how they shot that, like they shot it in real time, so to speak, and then they just reversed the footage, which I think was really cool. And even the deaths in this movie are like they're no slouch. Like you have the one guy who gets fucking ran over and burned and all that shit. You have the gas explosion, the gas station explosion. It has some really iconic and memorable deaths. And that's the thing. It's really great. Again, there's a part of me that still wants to put Carrie over Christine, but I think it's just the fact that I can relate to Arnie a little bit more. That's why I put it at number 12. Next up, we have Misery at number 11 from 1990. I mean, Kathy Bates, she won an Oscar for this movie. Not many horror movies win Oscars to begin with, especially top of the line awards like directing, best picture, best acting, or screenplay. But to have Kathy Bates win for Misery, and I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, this is the only Stephen King movie to win an Academy Award for acting, if I'm not mistaken. So, it's not fucking Shawshank, it's not fucking Green Mile. I don't know what other movies it will be, but it's Misery. No, Kathy Bates as Annie Wilkes is terrifying, don't get me wrong. It is terrifying. But honestly, credit to James Caan as well, because a lot of people didn't want to make this movie. They asked a lot of actors, Jack Nicholson, Al Pacino, for example. I think Michael Douglas as well, De Niro, etc. And a lot of actors didn't want to take this role because they knew they were going to be overshadowed by Kathy Bates. And not surprisingly, James Caan was overshadowed by Kathy Bates. But if I'm being honest, I think James Caan, at the very least, should have received an acting nomination. At the very least, because he also gave a great performance. And even on top of that, the Richard Farnsworth and I forget her name right now, but the actress that portrays his wife, they give a great sense of levity in this movie as the sheriff and his wife. And I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of sad when he died. When the fucking sheriff Richard Farnsworth died, I'm like, oh damn, he died. What the fuck? Fucking Annie Wilkes killing the sheriff. Like he was just a nice guy. What the fuck? I mean, clearly, it's my favorite Stephen King movie, or at least horror movie, because I think Shawshank probably takes the cake in that regard. Honestly, it's really well acted. It's got a really great story, and it just shows what obsession could be like when it comes to that fan celebrity relationship. And it's something that we've been seeing a lot more recently, especially in the modern age. And the fact that they were able to call that out in the 90s, like in 1990, I think it's just great. It's just amazing. It's kind of that. It's kind of that. It's amazing how relevant this movie still is to a certain degree. At number 10, we have Black Swan. And this is a movie that for me, as the years go by, as I become more invested as a filmmaker and an actor, as I spent more time in the industry, it's a movie that I understand a lot more. Granted, the filmmaking industry is so much more different than the ballet dance industry. That being said, I'm not gonna lie. There are people in the industry that I've seen that are just like Nina Sayers. There are people in the industry that I've seen that are just like Thomas. There are people in the industry that I've seen that are just like Mila Kunis's character. And I think it's just that the fact that I know people in this industry who are just like the characters in the movie. And to a certain degree, that's I don't want to say it's good because Black Swan is kind of a fucked up movie, but I just find the parallels between this movie and me in real life just very interesting. And the fact that I can say that, like, I that with every viewing, I relate to the movie or I understand the movie so much more because of the industry that I'm in. I don't know. I just find that very surprising in a good way. Find that surprising in a good way. And yeah, and it's very creepy. Of course, this is Aronofsky, so it's got some very creepy energy behind it. It's got creepy visuals. Her turning into a fucking bird, halfway through the movie. The visuals behind it, and her losing her mind throughout the whole movie. As she becomes this, as she starts off as this demure little girl or woman, and then is exploring herself, who she is as a person, sexually, and all this. It's just amazing. And I haven't really looked into this, but I have to imagine this was inspired to a certain degree by Carrie. I have to imagine by it. And oh, you also have Sigourney Weaver in this movie, like halfway through it, for some reason, which I'm not gonna say it threw me off, but it's like, oh my gosh, Sigourney Weaver's in this movie now. Yeah, it's kind of a nice surprise. Next up, we have Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, 1986. Again, similar to Silence, this is a movie that I'm just really disturbed by. However, unlike Silence, this is considered a horror movie, traditionally speaking. So, yay. But no, realistically, I am very disturbed by it because, to a certain degree, Michael Rooker, great actor by the way, he kind of brings this weird innocence to Henry, and then he just goes buck wild and kills everyone. He kills somebody with a TV set. He kills somebody with, he just chokes him out. He chokes out the prostitute. So, and that's the thing. Right off the bat, this guy's a bad guy because he kills like 5 people within the first 2 minutes of the movie. But I don't know. He just brings this weird innocence to the character, which I find very. I don't want to say endearing because that'd be a weird word to describe a serial killer. But I guess I kind of sympathize with the character. It's just, yeah, and more so that this is a real life person. Henry Lee Lucas, he was an actual serial killer. Yeah, I mean, there's deaths in this movie that I'm still gonna be disturbed by. For me, it's the one of the prostitute where he just chokes out of the car. That for me, that's the most disturbing death in the whole movie. But even the one with the guy, the TV salesman, the guy they just shoot in the fucking highway or the bridge or whatever the road, whatever that was. Like there are some visceral deaths in this movie, and it's very shocking, very appalling, very what the fuck, and I just like it. I just like it. And Michael Rooker, great performance. Next up, we have Train to Busan, one of the best zombie movies of all time. Definitely one of the best Korean movies of all time. Even forget horror for a second. One of the best Korean movies of all time. You have this story of a father who's just trying to get his little girl to their mom, and he's basically an absentee father. He's a workaholic. He's an absentee father, and now he's thrown into this situation where he's forced to take care of his daughter. And granted, I think generally speaking, he wouldn't be opposed to it, but it's the fact that now he's stuck in a situation where he has to really protect his daughter. And it's just really heartbreaking in a sense. It's very heartbreaking in a sense, especially with how it ends. After that, you also have the one big guy, the big father, who's trying to get back to his pregnant wife. And the story behind him is just great. And the actor, he does an amazing job here. And like you really feel for him. I mean, everybody here, all the characters you feel for, at least the ones you're supposed to feel for. Because I'm sorry, nobody gives a shit about that one asshole businessman in the movie who literally throws everybody to the fucking zombies. But yeah, honestly, this movie's just great. It brought zombies, especially in Korea, to the forefront because after that, it had stuff like #Alive and that one zombie school TV series that's on Netflix, for example. All of Us Are Dead or something like that, right? One of the greatest zombie movies of all time. It's really great. I really like it. It has fast zombies, which I mean, in my opinion, I always like fast zombies. And yeah, I mean, definitely go check it out if you haven't already. I'm surprised not many people have gone and seen it. So yeah. And then one thing I want to mention very fast about this movie, and I mentioned this in my top 10 favorite zombie movies of all time. This is actually part of a trilogy. You have Train to Busan, and a lot of people know about the sequel Peninsula, but not many people know about the prequel, which is called Soul Station. It's an animated zombie movie. Again, it's a prequel to Train to Busan. Definitely go check it out. I think it's very underrated. And yeah, just go check it out very fast. I always just like mentioning that because not many people even know Soul Station is a movie. Next up, we have Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street, 2007, at number 7. Again, like I said, Rocky Horror Picture Show, there's not that many horror musicals, and really, it's really between this and Rocky Horror. And honestly, for my money, Sweeney Todd takes the cake by miles. I mean, I think part of it has to do with the fact that it has Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp is just an incredible actor, and seeing him in this role is just amazing. This really tortured soul. You also have Alan Rickman in this movie. You have Timothy Spall. You have Timothy Spall in this movie as well. You know, Helena Bonham Carter in this movie as well. Like everybody here is just incredible actor. Everybody's giving it their all. It's really great, and the music here, it's iconic. Even for musicals in general, it has some iconic music. The kills here, the deaths in this movie are very horrific. Even if it is just people getting their throats slit, it's just horrific. And I think the other thing that helps with this movie is the fact that I've actually done a scene from this movie. You can actually watch here on my YouTube channel where I did the Pirelli scene, the when I was first starting to act, and and I think that just gives it an extra touch for me as to why I like it so much. But overall, this movie is great. The music in it is great. The performances in this movie are great. Overall, this movie is great. Definitely go check it out if you haven't already. Next up, we have The Batman vs. Dracula from 2005. Animated movie, children's horror movie, I don't care. Again, just like Zombie Island, this is a movie that I saw as a child, and it still scares the shit out of me. More so than Zombie Island, need I add, because there's shots here that or shots, moments, scenes that even to this day, where if I just think about them, I'm already scared. I'm just thinking about the whole thing with Joker. Yeah, Joker himself being turned into a vampire. The whole thing with the whole police chase where Dracula is slowly killing off the cops and turning them into vampires. The scene with the little girl where she manages to, lure one of her neighbors, and it turns out that this little girl's a vampire. And oddly enough, there's so much iconic imagery in this movie that still to this day scares the shit out of me. And this movie came out when I was like 6 or 7, straight up. 2005 came out when I was 6. I probably didn't see it until I was like 7 or 8. Still, from all this time, ever since I was 8 years old to this day, now almost 20 years later, it still scares the shit out of me. Like, goddamn, really well done, really well done. Next up, we have The Cabin in the Woods from 2011. This arguably is the horror comedy to beat all horror comedies. Though what they were able to do with this movie and essentially explain every other movie in history, every other horror movie in history, and break it down to its fucking core assets of what a horror movie is, and distilling the tropes of a horror movie to make it fit this narrative. I think it's just amazing. It's very funny. It's very darkly comedic, and it's one of those movies where after I saw this movie, I started thinking, oh, what other movies can fit into the formula that this movie is made? So of course you have stuff like Friday the 13th, you got Scream, Halloween, but then you also have stuff like Killer Clowns, let's be honest, or Chopping Mall. For me, that's one that always pops into my mind. The Faculty as well. I don't know, maybe you can make a stretch for Final Destination, maybe, but it's one of those things that you actually start thinking of what movies actually fit the tropes that they were discussing in this movie. It's just really cool. Marty coming back from the fucking dead. It's just very it's honestly, it's a cheer-worthy moment. This whole movie is just cheer-worthy is that the right word to explain it, because at the very end when the facility basically goes down and everybody's dying because fucking every monster in history is attacking the facility. I'm not gonna lie, that kind of is a cheer-worthy moment. Look at the behind the scenes for making some of those scenes, some of those shots. It's just amazing. It's crazy what they went through to make some of those shots in the facility when it was going fucking ham, when all the monsters were out and released. Yeah, it's the ultimate horror comedy. Next up, we have Halloween 1978, the original Halloween. I kind of just want to say it's Halloween and move on, because that's how iconic this movie is. It's Halloween. What do you expect? How is it not going to be on the list? What the fuck? I don't know. There's a part of me that kind of just wants to do that. I don't know. That seems like kind of a cop out. I mean, it is okay. Here's the thing. It is genuinely scary. It is genuinely scary. You have the stalker stalking you and killing you slowly. I don't know. It's kind of hard. Also, maybe because I'm sick, but it's just that it's Halloween. Did I say anymore? That's it. You know what? Fuck. I'm gonna move on. Next up, we have Jacob's Ladder, and again, I think this is another movie that many people may not consider a horror movie right off the bat, just like Dark City. But honestly, this is a horror movie. It's psychological horror, and it's a movie that I think is very underrated, in my opinion. It's not that not many people have heard of it. It's just that not many people have actually seen it. And yeah, and that's that. I just don't feel like that many people have seen it and have really appreciated this movie. And I really do think it's a movie that's really gone under the radar. It's about this guy who was in war in Vietnam, if I'm not mistaken, and he comes back. He lives in New York, if I'm not mistaken, and he comes back to like normal society, and whatever he experienced in Vietnam is slowly haunting him back. And his coworkers or not coworkers, his war buddies are coming back to him and saying, "Hey, they did something to us in Vietnam," and just the struggles that he has with that, and the analogy it has with PTSD, what soldiers struggle with when it comes to PTSD, and what they portray in this movie is just it's just amazing. I really like the way they do it, and it's got a twist at the end that I even though I've seen it so many times to a certain degree, I still don't expect it. I guess it just proves how well the twist is done. So yeah, definitely go check it out. Check out the original. Don't check out the fucking remake. The remake was yeah. I'm just gonna leave it at that. Don't check out the fucking remake. At number two, we have Zombieland. Okay, and like I said in my top 10 favorite zombie movies, this for me is my favorite zombie movie. Straight up, this is my favorite zombie movie. It's a gateway horror movie. It's a gateway zombie movie. It's a movie that I've been seeing already for over 10 years, 10, 15 years at this point. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. I love the characters in it. I love how relatable they all are. I love how you understand where they're all coming from. I just love the action in this movie. I love the zombies in this movie. That's it. That's why it's number two. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. And at number one, we have Psycho. So this again is one of my favorite movies of all time. This is definitely, if I had to say movies in general, this is for sure top five favorite movies of all time for sure. It's Psycho. I kind of just want to go with that. Similar to Halloween, I just want to say it's Psycho. What do you want me to say? I mean, Alfred Hitchcock's direction in this movie is just iconic. And Janet Leigh, the fact that she dies so early on in this movie and not many people expected that is great. Anthony Perkins, one of the best performances in film history in general. And the twist at the end, it's still surprising to this day. Even I've seen this movie I don't know how many times, but that twist still to this day works, and it's amazing. And yeah, that's it. It's Psycho. It's for me, it's my favorite horror movie of all time. And yeah, I mean, so much so that The Date, a movie I directed, which is called The Date, was actually kind of inspired by Psycho. Granted, not as well done as Psycho because Psycho is Psycho, but still, that's how much of a hold this movie has on me, essentially. And that it actually inspired one of my films. So yeah. And last but not least, I kind of just wanted to go over some honorable mentions very fast, and those are. I'm gonna say these in the order of year they were released. The honorable mentions are The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, Nosferatu, The Birds, Night of the Living Dead, Alien, The Terminator, Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream, Circle, Terrifier, Ready or Not, and Mad God. So yeah, those are the honorable mentions. Just wanted to say them very fast before I moved on. So yeah, that's basically it for now. Those are my top 50 horror movies of all time. Again, I'm sorry that I'm not actually on screen for this video. It's just I'm very sick. It is what it is. I still made the video. I still want to get it out there. So here we go. Down below, comment on what are your favorite horror movies of all time. Even if it's just top 1, top 2, top 5, whatever. Comment all that down below. Let me know. And yeah, that's basically it for now. This is Daniel Mart signing off.